Water! It's the lifeblood of every civilization, the most essential resource for life on Earth. But behind closed doors, a silent war has been raging over it for decades. While the world focuses on oil and land, governments, corporations, and covert agencies have fought to control the planet's most valuable resource, freshwater. Throughout history, access to water has been at the heart of human settlement, growth, and conflict. From the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt to the rise and fall of empires, control over rivers and lakes often determine the balance of power. But today, as populations explode and water supplies dwindle, we are entering a new era of water wars. The Nile, the world's longest river, has been a source of life for millions of people in Northeast Africa for millennia. Yet it has also been a source of geopolitical tension. Since the early 20th century, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan have been locked in a struggle over how to share its waters. In 1929, the Nile Waters Agreement gave Egypt the lion's share of the river's resources, granting it veto power over projects upstream. Fast forward to the 21st century, and Ethiopia has emerged as a new player in this high-stakes game, with its ambitious Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Africa's largest hydroelectric project. Ethiopia claims the dam is key to its development, but for Egypt, it represents an existential threat. Egypt relies on the Nile for 90% of its fresh water, and any reduction in flow could be catastrophic. While the Grand Renaissance Dam offers Ethiopia energy independence and economic growth, the tensions between Cairo and Addis Ababa have simmered beneath the surface, threatening to erupt into conflict. Military posturing and failed negotiations over the dam's water-sharing mechanism have left this region on the brink of a water war. As the 20th century unfolded, countries began to realize that dams were more than just tools for irrigation and energy, they were geopolitical weapons. Controlling the flow of rivers allowed upstream nations to hold significant power over those downstream, transforming water into a strategic resource. Turkey's southeastern Anatolia project, known as GAP, is a prime example. By constructing a series of dams on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Turkey gained control over the water supply to Syria and Iraq. The Ataturk Dam, completed in the 1990s, allowed Turkey to regulate water flow downstream, creating tensions with its neighbors, who depend heavily on these rivers for agriculture and drinking water. In Egypt, the Aswan High Dam reshaped the Nile, generating electricity and improving irrigation. But it also shifted the region's geopolitical dynamics, providing Egypt with leverage over Sudan and its own population. Meanwhile, in China, the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River became a symbol of both environmental devastation and national power, influencing water management far beyond China's borders. Water wasn't just a resource, it became a geopolitical weapon. Throughout the 20th century, countries like Sudan, Iraq, and Syria faced internal and external conflicts over access to water. Rivers like the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates provided control over the future of entire populations. By controlling the flow of these waters, nations could assert dominance over their neighbors. In Sudan, the struggle over water has contributed to some of the most devastating conflicts of recent times, including the Darfur conflict, where climate change and water scarcity exacerbated ethnic and political tensions. In Syria, the 2006 drought forced farmers to abandon their land, leading to mass migration into urban areas, a key trigger for the uprising that led to the Syrian civil war. As droughts intensify and rivers dry up, conflicts over water have become inevitable. The lack of water not only fuels conflict, but drives migration, pushing millions from rural areas into cities or across borders, leading to further instability. In the Middle East, water scarcity has always been a source of conflict. Countries like Israel, Jordan, and Syria have long competed for control over the Jordan River and its tributaries. Meanwhile, the Tigris and Euphrates, which flow through Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, have been the subject of decades of political tension and military posturing. Israel, in particular, has made water a cornerstone of its security policy. By occupying the Golan Heights and controlling water sources like the Jordan River, Israel ensures its own access to fresh water, while limiting the water available to Palestinians and neighboring countries. The 1967 Six-Day War wasn't just about land, it was about controlling water. In Iraq and Syria, the drying up of rivers like the Euphrates has contributed to civil unrest, food insecurity, and the rise of extremist groups. As water becomes scarcer, these struggles will only intensify, adding to the instability of an already volatile region. In South Asia, the Indus River represents both life and tension. The 1960 Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan remains one of the few successful water-sharing agreements in history, surviving even through wars. But climate change and rising populations are straining this fragile accord. India, with its growing population, has embarked on dam-building projects, such as the Kishan-Ganga Dam, on rivers that flow into Pakistan. These projects have sparked fierce opposition from Pakistan, which views them as a direct threat to its water security. In a region where both countries are nuclear-armed, even the smallest disruption in water flow could have catastrophic consequences. The Kashmir region, already a flashpoint for military conflict, holds even greater significance because of its water sources. Control over the headwaters of the Indus gives India significant leverage over Pakistan, adding another layer of complexity to an already tense relationship. As climate change reshapes the planet, the Arctic has emerged as the next frontier in the battle for water. Melting ice is exposing vast stores of untapped freshwater, and countries are racing to stake their claim to these resources. But unlike traditional disputes over rivers, the Arctic holds both opportunity and danger. The retreat of Arctic ice is opening new shipping lanes and revealing massive reserves of freshwater beneath the ice sheets. Russia, Canada, the US, and Scandinavian countries are all increasing their military presence in the region as the race to control the Arctic intensifies. The strategic importance of the Arctic goes beyond just water, it's a new battleground for global superpowers. Control over the Arctic means control over future shipping routes, energy resources, and freshwater reserves. As the ice melts, tensions will rise. While nations fight over water, millions suffer in silence. In drought-stricken regions across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, entire communities are being displaced. Fields that once provided food have turned to dust. Rivers have dried up. This silent crisis is creating new geopolitical flashpoints as water scarcity forces millions of people to migrate in search of survival. Take Lake Chad, once the fourth largest lake in Africa. Over the last 50 years, it has shrunk by 90%, displacing millions and fueling conflict in the region. Groups like Boko Haram have exploited the desperation of climate migrants, turning water scarcity into a breeding ground for extremism. By 2050, it's estimated that over 1 billion people could be displaced by water shortages. The world is facing a future where water scarcity and migration will reshape societies and borders. The silent crisis is only beginning. Few realize that the Tibetan Plateau, often called the Third Pole, holds the largest concentration of freshwater outside the polar ice caps. China's control over this plateau gives it unparalleled leverage over its neighbors, whose populations rely on these rivers for survival. As China continues to build dams and divert water, tensions are rising between Beijing and countries like India, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The Mekong River, which flows from Tibet into Southeast Asia, provides fresh water for over 60 million people. Yet, China's upstream dam projects are reducing the river's flow, threatening agriculture and fishing industries downstream. For countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, this could lead to food insecurity, economic collapse, and political instability. China's water dominance extends far beyond its borders. By controlling the Tibetan Plateau, China has positioned itself as a water superpower in Southeast Asia, with the ability to dictate water flows and ultimately control the future of its neighbors. As the world faces a looming water crisis, technology offers a glimmer of hope. Desalination plants, which turn seawater into fresh water, have transformed water-scarce regions like Saudi Arabia and Israel into agricultural powerhouses. Advanced irrigation systems are helping farmers maximize every drop of water, while water recycling technologies are being developed to reuse wastewater. In Israel, the introduction of drip irrigation has revolutionized agriculture, allowing farmers to grow crops with minimal water use. This innovation has been exported to countries like India and Mexico, helping to combat water scarcity in arid regions. But can these solutions be scaled globally? Desalination is already providing fresh water to millions of people, but the process is expensive and energy-intensive with significant environmental costs. Still, as technology advances, it may be the only way to solve the water crisis. The race is on to develop technologies that can bridge the water gap and prevent the conflicts of tomorrow. As global populations grow and climate change intensifies, the battle for water will define the 21st century. From the Middle East to South Asia to the Arctic, the fight for fresh water is just beginning. Nations, corporations, and communities will grapple with the reality that water is no longer a guaranteed resource. The question is no longer whether water wars will happen, they are already here. The question is, who will control the future of water and at what cost? The war for water is only just beginning. Water is life, but life is power. The future of water is the future of humanity.